Yeah, that's the start of this presentation. I do have some like fun stuff referencing Star Wars as well. I do like Star Wars, but I have to say I only really like the first 6 movies. With all the reruns and everything, I don't think it's a good thing for the franchise as a whole. But it doesn't matter. It's still fun to do something with a combination of this topic. So I do have to start off with addressing the elephant in the room. This is a picture that I actually took, I think, last October. I went to South Africa. I went there by plane. I still eat meat. So when looking at myself, I'm not perfect when it comes to sustainable, being the most sustainable person out there. I don't think anybody should be perfect, but at least if we are aware of stuff that we are doing and that we can actually see on what it means, it's something that we can help each other out with. So no, I'm not the most perfect person when it comes to being sustainable, but still it's the small things that count, and as we as a whole can work together to make everything a little bit better. And this was a statistic Mark, the previous speaker, also mentioned. We as an IT industry emit more carbon than the aviation industry. And that is something that is huge. I mean, a Dutch term is called vliegschaamte, that people don't take planes because they know how much carbon it emits and they feel bad about it. But people still are using cell phones, laptops, and everything that our IT industry actually uses, and they don't feel bad about it at all. Obviously, this has to be taken with a little grain of salt. I mean, this is in absolute numbers. The aviation industry emits indeed a lot more carbon than the IT industry, but the IT industry is more broadly used. It's more essential than flying. So you can still take it with a grain of salt. You don't need to stop using your phones or your laptops, but just make sure that you're aware of what you're doing. And it's this plane that's hopefully, it's the Millennium Falcon, that's hopefully better when it comes to emitting carbon than our planes right now. But still, that's a future that we cannot have at this moment. So it's something to be aware of. Obviously, there's always worse. We are destroying the planet, but not like this one. This is the Death Star, obviously, that's capable of destroying planets as a whole. So let's not go there, but it's something to be aware of, that we're heading down that path. The good thing is that we are currently in something called the twin transition. It's something pitched at the World Economic Forum, saying that right now we are a part of the digital transition. We've been there for the past couple of years, moving and making more digital stuff. But at the same time, we're also seeing people getting more aware of how sustainable they are. Eating better food that's more sustainable for the future. Obviously, we see solar panels all over the place. So we see 2 kinds of movements that are happening at the same time. And at the middle, the greening of and by IT, that's where digital amplifies sustainability. That's the sweet spot that we as developers can harness to... Okay, I don't know why that switched. Interesting. So we as developers, we can actually enable or leverage, I think it should be good now, where our digital stuff amplifies more sustainable software. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Let's switch back. Nope. Have you tried turning it off and on again?
Works for me.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, good. And if you don't do it either for yourself or for me, know that there's this corporate sustainability reporting directive coming on. It's something that the EU is actually forcing bigger companies to do, to show them how much carbon they are emitting when it comes to also the software, the hardware, but also like driving your car. And it's really important because This is more a financial kind of stuff that people have to act on in order to be more sustainable. Sustainability for the last past years, there's always been like a side thing, but the EU has these laws now in place that they have to make it even more mandatory. And when looking at this report from, I think it was November 2024, a Dutch newspaper said a quarter of the Dutch companies are not ready for mandatory sustainability reporting. And that's huge. Starting January 1st on 2025, this EU law is getting in place, so that means that the EU can actually fine companies that are not able to report on their current sustainability levels. And the thing is, not many people are aware of this. And that's kind of scary as well, because if they don't have the sustainability reporting in place, the EU can have like huge fines. So companies need to move towards more reporting of their exhausting. And the thing is that obviously a 2025 baseline, it is just all the companies are able to report on what their sustainability levels are. But everybody knows that in maybe 5 or 10 years, the EU will also force those companies to have 10% less CO2 inside of the air. So that's something to be aware of as well. So if your company is not yet doing this, depending on the size, just make sure that you know that someone, most of the times it's the CIO or the CFO, that has to do something about sustainability as well. So this is really important. So if you don't do the reporting for me, yourself, or anyone else, make sure that your company stays alive in order to get the sustainability software up and running. So for today, I'll start off with a little bit of green software. What is it? What does it mean? As well as the people. I mean, essentially, it's us, even developers, but also the project teams or managers that are essentially those people that have to make the change in order to get more sustainable software out. Obviously, this is a tech conference, so I'll aim at some technologies part as well. And I hope to inspire you and get you out of this room and have a great lunch all together with some interesting thoughts that you can implement easily. What you can do tomorrow, next week, or even later. Start small. Like I said, green software, it's about emitting fewer greenhouse gases. So we can learn from these guys. These guys are called the Ewoks. Those are from one of the first Star Wars movies. They live in a fully sustainable way. They live inside a forest. They eat fruits and berries. They don't have very strong weapons. That's why they lose actually the battle. That's too bad. But it's still very interesting to see how those little guys are able to live a happy life. And with that. There's something very good that's happening right now. The Green Software Foundation. Who has heard about the Green Software Foundation already? Yeah, obviously Mark. One small hand. So that's good that I'm inspiring most of you with something that's pretty awesome. So the Green Software Foundation has a lot of principles, patterns, and practices in place how you as developers can build better, greener software. And the thing is that the principles are more on a higher level. I'll dive into them later at a later slide. And the patterns and practices are more specific to your ecosystem. So I'm a Microsoft developer myself, but it's also the practices can be different for like a Java ecosystem, but the principles are still the same. So for my example, so since I'm a Microsoft guy, Azure Well-Architecture Framework has a lot of those practices already in place. So if you're using the Azure Well-Architecture Framework, you're already semi-automatically doing green software principles, and that's pretty good. Obviously, the examples that you're going to see here today are more Microsoft-oriented, but a lot can be applied to Java as well with a little bit of a different context. But I'll dive a little bit into the principles at first. So the first one is being more energy efficient. Consume the least amount of electricity possible. As developers, we are hardly aware of the kind of electricity that we're using. We do see reports like the Bitcoin mining is like already using the same amount of electricity as Greece for a country, for example. But what do we as developers do? We don't know it. But be aware that you are actually consuming energy. The second one, being more hardware efficient. So who in this room has their own server park? So not using a cloud provider. Who's their own servers? Still a couple? Still a couple? Shame. Don't be afraid. The thing is that even the cloud is still someone else's computer, right? But especially when you're using your own hardware, just make sure that it's like always performing at the maximum and not like having a server park that's only being used for 50%. Because even running that other 50%, it will cost electricity, as well as producing that hardware did also create a lot of carbon in the meantime. So also be more aware of that costs as well. And the last one is carbon awareness. Do more when electricity is clean and less when it's dirty. And this is where software developers actually can do something fun as well. As a software developer, I like to have some challenging work. And this is something that we can act on as well. And I'm going to dive into that. And it's something like the lightsaber as well. So who knows in this room where the lightsaber actually gets its power from? The crystal, right. It's actually the core of the lightsaber. There's a crystal with a certain color and power, and that also enlightens back when the lightsaber is actually extended. And who knows where the power from our sockets actually come from? Anyone?
Depends.
That's the software answer. It depends, but it's correct. Luckily, I can show you some of it, and that's where I'm going to switch, and hopefully this will stay working. So this is one example. There are lots of resources that you can use. It's called electricity maps. And right now we see here a map of Europe. And in the Netherlands we see, it's yellow right now. And what we can see is that the power that's being produced that we can actually get from when we plug in our laptops from in the socket, we can click on it. No, let's refresh and fingers crossed it still works. Yes, there we go. So right now in the Netherlands, it's yellowish. The color is yellow, and we see that because there's a lot of wind because of the storm right now. So our windmills are actually producing a lot of green energy. Solar is okay-ish. The sun is shining, so a lot of solar panels are actually getting a lot. But we still see that there's still a lot of gas being used inside of the Netherlands. And that's not the best kind of resource when it comes to using renewable energies. But when scrolling around inside of Europe, when we go to France, for example, they use a lot of nuclear energy when it comes to producing electricity in the grid. And in the north, when we go to Norway, for example, they use a lot of hydro. So those big lakes that they use in order to produce more waterfalls to get that energy, it's a way more sustainable and more interesting way to get electricity from resourcing. And Poland always has been like the kind of dark horse in Europe. They still use a lot of coal when they produce electricity. Thing is, if you have your own server park, don't put it in Poland. Not because it's because they produce like a lot of gray energy, and that's something that we don't want. So think about where you want to put your server park. If you want to use Norway or France, for example, it's a lot better than using Poland. I'm always afraid to zoom out on this map because even though we have like green spots and yellow spots, it's just like a mix. When zooming out, it's like this is how America looks. And it's mostly orange and red, and especially when you're moving over here, it's really dark. So also thinking about how much we as Europeans can have impact and helping the world as well to get more, producing their energy more green. Mark said it. The answer is it depends where the energy is coming from when plugging your laptop inside of the socket. And the thing is, it depends not only on location, and I see the screen is still blue. I'll have to retry it again. It does not only depend on location, but also based on time. I said right now the sun is shining, so as the country as a whole, we still have some form of solar energy, but during nighttime, obviously, we don't have it. It's something called carbon intensity, and depending on the time, we have different kind of variables on how the energy is being produced. The same amount of electricity is still getting out of the sockets, but how that energy is being produced can differ from time to time. So on the left side, it's daytime, a lot of wind and solar is being used, and just a little bit of coal and gas, which means the carbon emissions are actually pretty low. But during nighttime, because the power still has to remain the same, a lot of more coal and gas needs to be added in order to get the same amount of electricity. And it's those kind of stuff that we as developer can do something with. And that's what makes it fun for me, because that's the complexity that we can add as well. One of the first things is called temporal shifting, meaning wait with the execution of your code at a certain time when the CO2 reduction is at its lowest. I used to do my nightly builds, right? I think many still do. But now that you know that nightly builds are actually pretty bad when it comes to CO2 intensity, maybe we can wait until either early in the morning or we can do it at the end of the day or something like that. Just make sure that you are aware that you can do stuff. And also not only the build, but also like very heavy computations. You can either make those computations last longer, but they will cost, they will run longer, but they will cost less. And doing stuff like this will get you actually 12 to 16% reduction within a day. So just being aware of something that you can do by temporal shifting, waiting till the execution is finished, and shifting it to another time of day, it might be interesting for you as well. And the other one is being called spatial shifting. Like I said, like data centers are all around the world. When you're using a cloud provider, it's actually pretty easy to switch from cloud data center. Obviously, you still have to take account that you cannot go easily from the from the US to Spain in this example, when you have like laws and GDPR and all those kinds of rules in place. But you still can look at stuff like, okay, what would it mean for me if right now the data center is being hosted in the Netherlands, and I would switch that during certain times of day to, for example, Norway, where the energy is being produced at a more cleaner rate. That's something that we can actually program and build with. And using those numbers, we can actually get 30 to 90% CO2 reductions within the EU, depending on where you come from and how you implement this. But it's still something that you can think about as developers, making sure that don't use the data center in Poland, for example, but use the one in France. It all starts with people. Embedding sustainable software development methods, that's why I want to talk about it next. Who here is using something called FinOps? Nobody? FinOps a little bit? A little bit. So FinOps actually is like the focus on being more cost-friendly within your team. So making sure that the cost of your cloud is being as low as possible. I know the gemeente Amsterdam, I'm not sure about the English term, but what they did is they had a FinOps team and they had a GreenOps team, and they joined forces because GreenOps and FinOps is actually pretty close to each other. And they have like 80% shared resources. When they are able to bring costs down, they also bring the carbon levels down. And that's pretty awesome to have those learnings as well. It's like the Jedi. The Jedi actually started joining forces. At this point, they all fought together to defeat the bad people. I'm not sure which name it is one. But that's something that we should do as well. We should join forces with more people, and let's start small. Start with the team. So I'm assuming most of you are developers in this, at this conference. Create awareness. Make sure that what you hear today at my talk or at any other sustainable talks that you hear today, go back tomorrow or the day after at your work, that you heard this is possible for us as developers. Share your knowledge and your insights that you heard today. And make it more practical. Who here uses Scrum and uses retrospective as well? Glad to see that. So a lot of people are using retrospective to learn, right? And what would it mean if you would see those principles of green software engineering that I just showed you inside of your team? What kind of learnings can we hold on that point? The thing is that, for example, who's using OTAP or DTAP? Different environments, acceptatie, production. Is it really needed to get an acceptance or test that's running 24/7? Is it really needed? And that's something that you can discuss with the team. How can we as a team be more energy efficient? And the last one is also add more actionable items to the sprint. Start small. I don't want to change the world in one day. I want to do it in small steps. It does help that the EU is coming with their laws in order to force the change. But for us as developers, we can actually make the changes small as well. Are there, by any chance, a product owner in this room? No product owners? Then this is something that you can tell your product owners as well. There's this fun little thought experiment that goes like, what would it mean if our planet was a stakeholder? Obviously, product owners, they listen a lot to their business stakeholders, right? So how much money does it produce, return of value, etc. But what if one of our most important things, our planet, would be a stakeholder as well? How would it impact their stories? As the planet, I want to achieve more sustainability so that we as humans can enjoy the planet longer. It's something to think about and tell it to your product owner if their stories would be different. And lastly, are there some UI UX designers in this room? Mostly developers. I'm very proud of you all. But there's something called green UX as well. Think about file sizes. For example, the very classic one, nobody uses bitmaps anymore, so BMP files. But what kind of files are actually the best for you? Is it like vector, or is it JPEG, or is it GIF? It's GIF. And optimize for less space. I think Mark actually also had like a very nice example at his previous talk. So when starting up when you have a website, don't start directly a video playing in the background that consumes either energy, resources, and it's pretty annoying as well. So don't do that. And that's the kind of stuff that UXers can take in account as well. And the last one is actually pretty interesting as well. Let the end user decide. And what I mean with that, obviously maybe you order some stuff online like bol.com or Amazon. You see those green check marks. This is the most sustainable option when delivering it. Especially if you don't care if you want it tomorrow or maybe the day after, you can just select the most green option. We can also do that with our software. When do we need this report? Do I need it right now? Or can I get it somewhere tomorrow when the sun is shining, because generating that report takes energy as well. Let the end user decide on what he or she wants to do. And there's also like tools available with that. I think later today there's this talk about CO2.js that also measures the CO2 from your website. But there's also this website called the Website Carbon Calculator. And what I did is I took the TEQnation website, I pushed it through the calculator. Not looking that good. So if anyone from the organizers sees this right now, maybe for next year we can get this number up, right? And this is like the big Darth Vader saying no about this technology, but it's still fun. And now switch to a more tech side. I checked the room, a lot of developers. Let's go more on the tech side. So it seems like the robots from Star Wars, R2D2, 3CPO, and yeah, BB-8. Thank you very much. So those are the tech guys from Star Wars as well. Who knows? We've seen this graph before. Okay, more people. Good. I do intend to add this as more of a joke. Don't take it way too harsh or way too seriously. But this was like a report from 2021 where they compared how energy efficient programming languages are compared to each other. And I'm not gonna list all of them, but mostly three. The first one being Java. This is mostly Java developers at this conference. So it is actually very, very good. I'm a C# developer. It's still a way to go when it comes to comparing to Java. But looking at Python, it's not that good. So as developers, maybe if you have the possibility to switch programming languages purely based on energy efficiency, just think about this graph. Obviously, don't take it with a grain of salt. Because Python is an interpreted language, but it also has like a compiled version. It should be more efficient when it comes to energy, but it's still something to think about. And especially with AI booming and being all over the place, Python is mainly used in that sector as well. It's really hard to write the same kind of code in other languages. So, but just be aware of what you're doing. And talking about AI, so this is a graph coming from, I think it was 2019, where it compares how much carbon stuff is actually consuming. And on the left, we see air travel from New York City to San Francisco. It's the 2 on the scale of CO2 emissions. While on the right side, it's training an AI model. It's over 300% more. For training an AI model, it consumes so much energy. And this was still in 2019. That was actually before the LLM rage actually got bigger. So I'm not sure if how these currently scale up. But if you are an AI model, if you generate your AI models, think about this graph as well, and especially think about how many times should I generate this AI model, as well as which kind of energy is we using, and is it really needed? So something to think about, because those numbers are not that good. Some quick wins that we as developers can do as well. Compress and store data. When you compress your data before storing it, it takes up less hardware, even when it's in the cloud. Nuance on this one is don't make sure that it's not hot data, because compressing and decompressing obviously also takes more energy. But especially when you're able to identify parts of your applications where the storage is a little bit longer, you can easily just compress the data. On the left part, we see optimize. Optimize code by doing less external API or database calls. Mark in the previous talk also said something about select star from database and only using a small part of it. That's optimizing. Why would you need to collect all the data, store it in memory, and only using a small part of it? It's just more waste. And who here is using observability and logging? Yeah. Many people, right? The thing with that is that we tend to consume or collect a lot, and I mean seriously a lot of data. Obviously we need it because either legal or it's going to be useful in the future, but we're not many times aware of how long we should store it and if it's still needed for the next couple of 5 years. So think more conscious about the stuff that you're storing, as well as how long are you storing it. Making sure that you get those numbers down when it comes to using more of the hardware as well. There are some Azure-specific stuff. The one thing that I want to talk about is spot instances. Spot instances are actually virtual machines that are not being used anymore, but you can still use in order to get your workflow going. Deploy workloads that can handle interruptions and don't need to be completed within a specific period of time. What it means is that you are able to use that virtual machine whenever it comes available at a really, really low cost because someone else didn't need it anymore. So costs will go down, but you don't know exactly when you're going to get the result as well. So that's something that we as developers should it's going to be a little bit harder, but it's still good to know because that thing is already running in the cloud. Why wouldn't you use it? Store and swap blob data from hot, cool, and cold data, different tiers. All kind of cloud providers has this as well. Hot data and cold data. Cold data is always and cheaper, but it's also more efficiently stored. So think about it as well. And when thinking about cloud, so this is called PUE, the power usage effectiveness. In this image, we see on the left, we see the electricity grid. And the electricity grid produces 15 kilowatts of energy. It just gets it from the grid. And it uses in the data center, for example, 5 kilowatts as overhead, while only 10 is being used for the servers. So the overhead is cooling and everything around it, mostly cooling actually. So the power usage effectiveness is 1.5. So 0.5 is being lost when using certain cloud providers. And the cloud providers are actually aware of this. So this is a report, I think it was from last year. And in the middle, you see the PUE, and you want to get it as low as possible. So as you can see, Amazon right now is doing the worst compared to the other two big cloud providers when it comes to CO2 emissions. And obviously, it really depends on the location, and I know all the cloud providers are aware of this, so they are effective, they are really moving forward to get those numbers mostly to one-on-one. So one energy on the grid equals one energy being used to the servers, but you still need stuff like cooling and the housing and everything. So they really need to get those numbers down as well. But when selecting your cloud, just make sure that the PUE is something that you can think about as well. Which cloud provider do you feel most comfortable with? And this is one of the hardest parts of this talk. And sadly, I'm really sad, I cannot give you the best answer. This is the silver bullet that you can use in order to measure everything. What you cannot measure, you cannot improve. You don't know it. And the thing is that the Green Software Foundation that I talked about earlier has a wonderful formula in order to measure stuff. It's called the SKI, software carbon intensity, which is measured by energy being consumed by your software, times the carbon intensity emitted in kilowatt hours or energy. Added to that the embodied carbon, so the hardware that it's running on, per R, and R is actually a functional unit. So for example, when you have a web shop running, how much energy would it cost one user in order to put something in your shopping bag and check out? That's something that you can define as R. Yeah, my face goes like that. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have some idea, obviously, but this is really hard. And the thing is, there are some tools available that can give us more insights on that, but most of the tools are either in like beta, alpha, 0.4 versions or whatever. So it's still something that everybody needs to improve on. Luckily, Azure can help us also, and this is like a preview version as well, like I said. They have the Cloud for Sustainability API. Amazon does as well. It's an endpoint that you can call as a developer how much emissions that server is actually producing or has produced. So when you're combining that with your own software, you can actually see what kind of emissions it actually costs in order to have that running. Luckily, they also have this emissions impact dashboards that's like on top of that API. It's based on each, where you can see all your solutions running all over the world on how much carbon they are actually producing. It's very useful, but still, this needs to be improved by Microsoft and other vendors as well. Dynatrace, for those that do a lot of observability, Splunk and Dynatrace have plugins for this as well. So Dynatrace has a tool called Carbon Impact. I think that they have a 0.15 version produced in January. I think we are now in 0.30 or something, but not fully production-wise. But at least it gives you some insight on how much carbon you're creating. I still have to do CADA. I'm sorry, Mark. Kubernetes event-driven autoscaling. Who's doing Kubernetes over here? Yeah, okay, so lots of people, that's good. You can use CADA for this as well. What CADA is actually doing, the electricity map that I showed you before on how the electricity is being used, it can scale based on the data that electricity map is providing. So it can either wait for scaling of the Kubernetes cluster when the electricity is cheaper and more green, or it can wait and say, okay, no, is not the time, we'll do it at a later moment, or have to move to another region. So CADA might be something to think about when you're using Kubernetes anyway and need something to autoscale. Lastly, the impact framework. This is something that's really, really new and sadly, right now, not that great when it comes to putting it in production. It's a project from the Green Software Foundation as well, but that's the tool that makes a promise. That's going to be the silver bullet. You can implement it either in your pipeline or in your software, and it will actually produce numbers like the total embedded emissions, so the hardware where it's running on, based on the expected life expectancy of that hardware, how much embodied emission is it currently producing, as well as the grid intensity, what kind of processor it's running on, and it gives you all those informations that you can need. Okay, maybe I should either switch machine or make my code more optimized in order to get the most green software out of it. This is really, really like in beta stuff, but the fun thing is that last month they actually had like a hackathon, a worldwide hackathon running for over 2 weeks, and there were lots of teams actually joining this open source framework in order to improve it. And they had lots of tools implemented as well. Having said that, I know it's a lot of information, a lot of me talking, but I still want to give you some insights about your first actions that you can do tomorrow or later. Start with inspiring other people. Start with what I've heard today, green software, it's a thing, Green Software Foundation, it's a thing. We as developers actually can do something about making a better planet. Secondly, start measuring stuff, even if it's just a baseline. It's better than nothing, right? Start putting tools in place in order to even talk to, for example, a higher management on a later date. This is what we're actually producing right now when it comes to carbon. And if we tweak small things, we can make it better, and I can prove it to you. Make sure you set a proper baseline. Start small with like a team, a planet retrospective, get those quick wins, shut down your acceptance environment, not running 24/7, and make sure you embed it in your workflow. Don't make it a one-off fluke because you think it's fun, but this is so important, at least to me. It's something that you should do repeatedly and more times than just once a month or something. So I added a lot of resources in here as well. On the left, top part, you see the Green Software Foundation. I've talked about it a lot. Sustainable IT is also more on the business kind of spectrum because, yeah, that's hard. How can we make the business case for green software? The Agile Playground actually talks a lot about the planet Earth as a stakeholder. And the Coalitie Duurzame Digitalisering, it's an organizer also in the Netherlands that talks a lot about this as well. They have like insights about also when you're working from home, for example, what can you do when working from home to be more sustainable and more green? So it gives a lot of insights as well as those 2 books. The Green IT actually is getting launched next month. But I talked to the author, and it's a very interesting a way of how he sees the world, especially when it comes to the business more perspective. Having said that, I'm going to wrap up with one of the greenest guys from Star Wars, with this quote: "Do or do not, there is no try. This is the time that we as software developers get to do something about sustainability, especially when seeing the digital twin, the twin transition that's going on. We should act as developers. Thank you. May the force be with you, and enjoy your lunch.